So years ago when I was doing up my presentations and I was getting all the data, highlighting how nutrient deficiencies, one, in the soil, and then two, how that translates into nutrient deficiencies in the food, not just from depleted soils, but also because of the use of synthetic herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and that when we apply those to the soil, that it actually disrupts the what we'd call, I guess, the microbiome of the soil. That's very similar to the microbiome within our intestinal tract. And it prevents the uptake of nutrients into the plants. So now we have these plants that are incredibly devoid of nutrition. Well, when we take a look at the timeline as to when all of this happened, as to when all of these synthetic herbicides and pesticides and fungicides were being applied, we can see a major rise in all chronic disease within North America. So I was looking at it from the perspective of mental health and looking at the astronomical rise in mental health conditions over this particular period that really started to take an upward swing around the 70s. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't good before the 70s, but in the 70s, it started to take a real upswing in relation to the prevalence of mental health conditions. Well, here's what's of interest, is that when you take a look at thyroid conditions, the graphs, basically, you could overlay them and they look the same. Thyroid cancers, thyroid disease, obesity. When we take a look at, things like osteoporosis, we see all of these issues that are caused because of nutrient deficiency disorders or nutrient deficiencies occurring at about the same rate. And so why do we see this major prevalence in relation to the rise of thyroid issues? It's because our body requires certain fundamental nutrients in order to regulate the whole endocrine system, including the thyroid.
Thyroid dysfunction is one of the most misunderstood and mismanaged health challenges in the modern world. Fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, anxiety. Millions are experiencing the symptoms, but very few are being told the full story of why it's happening. Today, we are changing that. Welcome back to Truehope Cast, the official podcast of Truehope Canada. I am your host, Simon Brazier. In this episode, we're diving deep into the Truehope protocol for restoring optimal thyroid function, a powerful, non-invasive, nutrient-based approach that addresses the root cause, not just the symptoms. And joining me today is Vice President of Truehope Canada, Mr. David Stephan. During this conversation, David breaks down the Truehope protocol for optimal thyroid health, what's really driving dysfunction, the critical nutrients your thyroid depends on, and how to support the body in restoring balance and energy from the inside out. This isn't just theory, this is lived experience, clinical insight, and a mission-driven pursuit to redefine what healing can look like. If you have ever struggled with low energy, hormonal imbalance, or felt like your body just isn't firing on all cylinders, this conversation could change the way you think about your health. Enjoy the show. Okay, hi David, welcome back to the show. How are you? What's going well?
Doing really well here. What's going well? Well, spring is upon us. Stuff turning green. I mean, we're at high elevation here by the mountains, so things are a little slower than most people. I mean, a lot of people are experiencing greenery and leaves on the trees. We'll see that in about a month, but things are looking up, and we already have stuff growing in the greenhouses, so it's fantastic.
Beautiful. Happy to hear that. Well, today we're going to be talking about the thyroid, and specifically the title for this episode is Rebuilding the Thyroid, a researched nutrient-based protocol. I have been working with Truehope for a long time, but in the short period of time that I've been working as a sales rep on the road, having conversations with people every single day about our products, why they're very unique, why they're very different. So many people have thyroid problems, thyroid disorders, underactive, overactive, and it's just hit me really in the past 6-7 months about how prevalent this type of a disorder is. And having conversations with individuals like yourself and our amazing team here at Truehope, we have a very different perspective about root cause nutrition, root cause deficiencies, etc., and how that can proliferate into different disorders. So I'd love to be able to talk about that with you today. I think we'll jump in initially to let's set the foundation a little bit here about why we believe there is this huge problem. So, from your perspective, Why are we seeing such a massive rise in thyroid dysfunction in today's culture?
Fantastic question. Fantastic question. And I know that you don't, you're assuming what the answer is going to be, I think, but we haven't actually conversated about this. So years ago, when I was initially doing my presentation up, the main presentation surrounding mental health, because we know that Truehope is really a mental health organization, albeit we've started to branch out into different areas, including thyroid health, because thyroid health does affect mental health, and we've had to address some serious issues there. And the approach that we've taken with mental health, that's been incredibly effective, in fact, more effective than what we see with standard medications or with other natural treatments. Being that we've been able to discover the root cause issues there, that has also overlaid into the thyroid health aspect. So years ago, when I was doing up my presentations and I was getting all the data, highlighting how nutrient deficiencies, one, in the soil, and then two, how that translates into nutrient deficiencies in the food, not just from depleted soils, but also because of the use of synthetic herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and that when we apply those to the soil, that it actually disrupts the what we'd call, I guess, the microbiome of the soil. That's very similar to the microbiome within our intestinal tract. And it prevents the uptake of nutrients into the plants. So now we have these plants that are incredibly devoid of nutrition. Well, when we take a look at the timeline as to when all of this happened, as to when all of these synthetic herbicides and pesticides and fungicides were being applied, we can see a major rise in all chronic disease within North America. So I was looking at it from the perspective of mental health and looking at the astronomical rise in mental health conditions over this particular period that really started to take an upward swing around the 70s. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't good before the 70s, but in the 70s, it started to take a real upswing in relation to the prevalence of mental health conditions. Well, here's what's of interest, is that when you take a look at thyroid conditions, the graphs, basically, you could overlay them and they look the same. Thyroid cancers, thyroid disease, obesity. When we take a look at, things like osteoporosis, we see all of these issues that are caused because of nutrient deficiency disorders or nutrient deficiencies occurring at about the same rate. And so why do we see this major prevalence in relation to the rise of thyroid issues? It's because our body requires certain fundamental nutrients in order to regulate the whole endocrine system, including the thyroid. And that as soon as you become deficient in any one of the key nutrients, you end up with a break in that biochemical pathway where now you're not producing certain hormones, where now your thyroid isn't being supported. And now you're going to end up with a dysfunctional thyroid. And now you're going to end up with a diagnosable thyroid disease. And that's exactly why we're seeing what we're seeing, is going right back to the root. We're starving for nutrition, even though we have an overabundance of food available to us at all times of the year.
Yeah, you make a huge point in regards to the terrain within our gut, the terrain within the soil, because I think that most people understand and have experience about what like a course of antibiotics does to somebody's gut. And it's essentially eradicating all life, not being, specific and pinpointing the actual bacteria that's actually causing the problem. It's eradicating everything. And if you're not very active in regards to replenishing that microbiome, then people struggle significantly for long periods of time. And then you imagine on like an industrial global scale, the amount of chemicals, the herbicides, the fungicides, the pesticides that are being chucked and thrown on our soil, on our plants, what that is doing to the disruption of these vital organisms that are supposed to be there, that's supposed to be engaging in the soil within the plant system to create whole foods for us that engage with our biology as well. And then we're able to extract the minerals, the vitamins, the amino acids from these different foods that our body uptakes and creates everything that we are. So
Mhm.
if we are constantly consuming food, and at this point it's unavoidable that that people are essentially just being poisoned by the food system. And for me to understand that, there's no place for anyone not to be supplementing with good quality products, because everybody is in a state of lack. and the human body can get people through quite a lot. And a lot of people kind of forget what feeling good looks like, because the body can get through it. It can get through it and get through it until the point of like where it cracks and it breaks and you get significant symptomology, which is too much to ignore. So people go to a doctor, they talk about the symptoms that they have, and hopefully they get the time to talk about all of the symptoms, because sometimes you can only talk about one symptom at a time. And then there is this prescription or something that's been given to deal with those symptoms, when we should be looking back years and years and years to what this individual has gone through, and how a root cause approach, a perspective of, functional nutrition, functional medicine, whatever you want to look at, is the only way that you'd actually really be able to diagnose effectively, rather than just symptom management.
Band-aid approach. And it's unfortunate because all they're doing is looking at the outward symptom, but that's not at all what's going on behind the scenes. Behind the curtains, there's a lot of gears that are turning. There's a lot of dysfunction that's happening to then get to the point of that manifestation of maybe one particular symptom, or maybe a handful of symptoms. So now all they're doing is applying a Band-Aid to those symptoms. And the human body is phenomenal. It is incredible at surviving. And we, as human organisms, if you will, as a species, we have all of these protective measures built in. Our whole skeletal system is a store of minerals. And do you know why a lot of people end up with osteoporosis? It's because they were deficient to the point that their body's vital functions were going to shut down. And so the body began to rob, or to borrow, hopefully borrow, with the intent of getting back minerals from the bones, from the skeletal system, so as to keep those vital functions running. But when you don't return what you've taken, eventually you get to the point where you have a compromised skeletal system. So the body is phenomenal at, for lack of better terms, at robbing from Peter to give to Paul.
Yeah.
And you do that long enough, yes, you're in a state of survival. You become accustomed to the ambient level of well-being. This is how I feel. But you're never in a state of thriving. You'll never be in a state of thriving until you have adequate levels of nutrition to allow for all functions in the body to be able to function at the highest capacity. And that's where we're at today. Even though we have this overabundance of food available to us, our ancestors never had this. I mean, I can go down and get watermelons right now. I mean, we're talking April, and I can go get watermelons right now. My ancestors didn't have access to watermelons in April, not unless they lived in the southern hemisphere. So, there's this beautiful access to food that we've never had, but yet the food is so devoid of the nutrition that in order for me to make a healthy choice today, if I choose, let's say I choose a really nice spinach salad, right? Got all the fixings. It's really lovely. People looking at it, wow, that's amazing. Do you know that I have to eat about 6.5 times the amount of that same spinach salad as what my great grandparents would have had to eat in order to get the same nutrient values? About 6.5 times the amount. We're sitting at about 20% or less, oftentimes, in the mineral content within the foods today as what our great grandparents had access to. So we can see how we're literally, and the science backs us up. I mean, there's multiple studies to highlight, one, the soil issues, that we have less than 50% of the mineral content in the soils, and two, that now with the advent of all these synthetic herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, that it's compromised the soil to the point that we're sitting at about 20% or less of key nutrients within our foods today. So we're literally starving, and it's putting our whole bodies into a state of dysfunction. This is why we see a major rise in mental health conditions. And I know that that's not what we're talking about today, but that's why we also see that the greatest thing that somebody can do to correct a severe mental health condition, or even a minor mental health condition, is just get rid of the deficiencies, the mineral deficiencies. Those minerals are called coenzyme factors that help facilitate the conversion of amino acids to turn into various neurotransmitters like serotonin or dopamine that will actually affect your mood. But if you don't have the coenzyme factors, the enzymes will not catalyze, if you will. They won't convert the amino acids into those various neurotransmitters. So
Yeah, sorry, just to interrupt you there for a second. I just absolutely love this point because now I have this conversation with people all of the time, especially the incredible store staff that work in the retail stores across the country. The fact that our products are very different, our approach is very different in regards to the healing journey for a lot of people. You can go into a health food store, you can pick up this product and that product to kind of take a step forward in your health journey, a positive step forward in your health journey. But for a lot of people, it's actually taking a couple of steps back is probably the more important thing to do, because with our products, you're taking care of those foundational nutritional pieces. So I describe it as, listen, let's take a couple of steps back here. Let's make sure your body's getting what it should be getting on a daily basis in order to function effectively. And then let's assess and see where you're at. Because I think a lot of people out there with sleep disorders or anxiety disorders or whatever it might be, it could just come down to a simple lack in specific certain nutrients for a long period of time. So people might not have those sleep disorders. They might just be chronically nutrient deficient. So I think it's really valuable to take a couple of steps back and cover those foundational nutritional pieces, especially with Empower Plus and some of our other products, and then see where people are at.
yes. Yeah, and if you're going to chase down the sleep thing, I know we're kind of digressing here and we're going to focus in on the thyroid issue, but oftentimes people will come to us with depressive issues and they also have an accompanying sleep issue. Well, here's what gets interesting is that serotonin is known for helping elevate the mood. And it is theorized, because none of this is an exact science. Scientists aren't opening up people's brains and examining them while they're alive if they're in a depressed state to see exactly what's going on. But what we do know is that the production of serotonin requires 7 different specific nutrients. And it starts off with tryptophan, an essential amino acid. And then you require iron, methylfolate, which takes a host of nutrients as well to take folic acid or any vegetable form of folate and convert it into methyl tetrahydrofolate. And so you have that one directly involved. So there's 2, iron, methylfolate, and then vitamin C, D, and B3. That will get the initial reaction going to convert the tryptophan into 5-hydroxytryptophan. And then all you need is pyridoxine 5-phosphate, which is activated B6, to then convert 5-HTP into serotonin. Now, serotonin, though, here's what's interesting, is the precursor to melatonin. So if you're not producing adequate amounts of serotonin, you're not going to feel very good. And you're likely not going to be producing enough melatonin, so you're not going to sleep very good. And we see this very common. So now when people take the Empower Plus and they're getting the host of nutrients that they need and they're now feeling better, they're also sleeping better simply by just putting the proper nutrition into their body. So we can see how you have these chain reactions, literally. But as soon as you break one of the links in the chain, the whole thing's done. You're not going to produce adequate amounts of melatonin if you don't have adequate amounts of serotonin to eventually convert into melatonin.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're gonna do a whole podcast on sleep, inositol, and those other massively huge important cofactors that are involved in that, because sleep is a huge big topic, a huge big thing that a lot of people are struggling with, and quite frequently people get really poor recommendations when it comes to taking something to actually help with sleep. So we'll certainly be back to cover that one because it's a very important topic, but it's also monstrous. So I'd love to ask you about what do you think other like lifestyle factors and other stressors that are contributing to people's damaged thyroids, other than the fact that we're not getting the requirements of nutrition from our food anymore?
Well, you have all sorts of aspects. I mean, even just our diets. If we have an issue where we're really carb loading all the time and all that, I mean, you can end up causing issues to the endocrine system. It can go vice versa. If you go the opposite direction into a state of ketosis for an extended period of time, and you have basically no insulin being produced, then it's also going to put your thyroid into basically a state of dormancy or into a dysfunctional state as well. And so balanced diet is crucial. Don't go hard one way or hard the other way. I'm a bit of an advocate to go keto from time to time. I don't mind it, but don't do it for an extended period of time. We weren't designed for that, because if you do, your thyroid, I mean, the studies highlight it. when a lot of these autistic children were doing the keto diets to help them. And it did have a profound function in relation to their brain health. But a lot of them ended up with thyroid issues, and the research shows it. So not something to do necessarily for an extended period of time. Go off on. And so there's that aspect. Just the toxicity load creates dysfunction. Now, here's what's interesting. Linus Pauling, incredible mind, brilliant mind. Not that I want to, establish unwarranted authority, but he did win multiple Nobel Peace Prizes for the discoveries that he was making. He would come out with the statement that nutrient deficiencies were more dangerous to your health than being exposed to like radioactivity. And here's why, is that when you don't have proper nutrition in your body, the same oxidative stress will take place. The same degradation will take place. And even worse is that now when you're exposed to toxins, your body can't handle the toxins if you don't have the pathways working appropriately that require nutrition. So example, we did a podcast on this a few years back about methylation. Methylation is absolutely crucial for life itself, just in a very general sense. But the very conversion of numerous nutrients to put them into an activated state that allow for our body to function. And I go back to the serotonin pathway. If you're not producing methylfolate, you're not going to be producing adequate amounts of serotonin, which then leads to melatonin. So your mood's going to be messed up. Your sleep's going to be messed up. So methylation is crucial, but methylation requires proper nutrients, even if, and I'm going to put this in here, even if you have the MTHFR gene mutation or another gene mutation. What's of interest is that those gene mutations can be corrected, and we've seen it. And that's through changing the internal environment of the body by putting the proper nutrition in and allowing the body to come out of that state of dysfunction that would cause genetic mutations. And we have seen it. We have actually seen people test positive for these genetic mutations. And then within a number of months of being on a therapeutic dose of the Empower Plus, they're coming out without them. Now, that's not the case with everybody, but we have seen it. So it's very hopeful, highlighting that these genetic mutations can be, in fact, corrected. So when we talk about methylation and toxicity, methylation is crucial for the conversion of toxins and heavy metals in the body to put them into a form that your body can actually remove. And if you're not methylating appropriately due to nutrient deficiencies, then you're actually going to be a storehouse of toxins. And this is a common factor with many children that have autism, is that a common factor is that they have the MTHFR gene mutation, that they're not methylating appropriately. So when they're subjected to different environmental toxins or toxins coming through medical treatments, if you will, or injections, vaccines, they're not able to handle it like somebody else would. And that's why they have the devastating effects. Now, I'm not here to advocate that, we should get people methylating properly and then still inject aluminum or mercury into them. Absolutely not. The mercury and aluminum should not be in children. But the fact of the matter is that's why children oftentimes will respond in that way, where they'll develop autism after being subjected to these various toxins, whether it be environmental or whether it come through an injection. So lifestyle aspect, the stressors in life, the busy go, the hyperstimulus, the toxins that we're being persistently subjected to, the messed up sleep patterns, oftentimes due to screen time right before bed, the lack of discipline. We're ripe for dysfunction within our society. Like, our bodies are just ripe for dysfunction based on all of the multifaceted angles that we're being hit by with, technology, toxicity, sleep deprivation, lack of discipline, all of that. It's all attributing to it. But at the root of all of it, when we take a look at why, something might be in dysfunction like the thyroid, oftentimes it can be entirely corrected simply by putting the proper nutrition back in and allowing the body to heal itself.
I also think there is a big piece when it comes to the nervous system and stress. I think most people understand that when they are in a high stress situation, their body isn't in a place to repair replenish, grow, proliferate. It just can't do that. It can't engage in that when it believes it's in a highly dangerous situation.
Hmm.
And long-term nutritional deficiency is an internal life-threatening situation. And there's no way the body can heal and make you feel great when it is constantly in a state of lack. And that's a trickier thing for people to maybe wrap their head around or experience. I think that when you've got like a big meeting or a stressful situation, people get anxious, they get agitated, they speak really fast, like all these things kind of like come out. They're more external, more obvious symptoms. But it's very tricky for you to you to internally experience or even propriocept the internal sensations of the stress that you will be giving your body every time you're not supplementing properly, because you can't get enough nutrition from our food these days. And if you do
Yep.
that for long periods of time, we are just going through every single day and in like this internal volatile inflammatory stress response that is a very tricky thing to deal with if we let it get to a point where the body is giving you big messages, big symptoms of like, we are in trouble here.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely agreed. That aspect as well. Just the persistent stress, trauma. I'll even say perceived trauma, that oftentimes when we're not right in our heads, that we will actually fabricate narratives where we've experienced trauma that never actually existed. We've seen it many, many times. And it plays into oftentimes our victim mindset, which oftentimes is associated with a mental health condition. And so when people are lacking the nutrition and they have misfiring taking place in the brain when they don't have adequate neurotransmitter functioning, we will see this type of stuff arise, and it plays a role in the entire body. You end up in a stressful situation that may actually not be nearly as stressful as you're making it out to be, but your body doesn't know the difference and it will respond accordingly. So that's a fantastic point that you bring forward there, and that will have an impact on everything, especially including the adrenals and then the thyroid, because they're interrelated. So we can actually, within our minds, create an endocrine system dysfunction just based on the perceived stress that we can't get rid of due to the fact that we're misfiring. That's it. Just plain simple. We're misfiring. Overactive brain's not shutting off.
Yeah. I remember some of your presentations, you recite a paper, I think it was from the 30s, about how devastatingly nutrient poor our soil is, and that's nearly 100 years ago. I think back to when I was at school and in the mental health crisis that we have today. I don't recall any of it. I don't recall people with significant serious mental health disorders, ADHD, ADD, all these things. And now it's like every other child in school is suffering from these disorders. And then you have personality disorders, you have identity stuff. I think so much of it is we're right now at this high level apex of this dangerous situation where there's no nutrition in our food anymore. And there are, agricultural government entities whose responsibility it is to make sure that we are getting enough food, getting enough nutrition from our food. And I understand that is a complicated and often very, very expensive project. But I honestly think they're trying to get away with the most minimal possible amount of nutrition to, not cause even more damage. And I think that what we see now in our culture in regards to mental health problems that everyone's got, I think we're just at this massive, dangerous crossroads that is scary. It's honestly a scary situation.
When I hit the road years ago, spent a lot of time traveling across Western Canada mainly, sometimes venturing into Eastern Canada for presentations, doing public presentations, also doing numerous, like a lot of presentations in store for health food store staff. But I had my thumb on the pulse as to what was taking place within, for health crises across Canada. And 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, I mean, I put probably about 1 million kilometers on the car, traveling back and forth and back and forth, basically lived in the car. But here's what was interesting is very rarely would I hear about Hashimoto's. And never would I hear about Graves during that time period. Now, Graves is more rare than Hashimoto's. But I'd hear about thyroid conditions. There was a lot of people taking desiccated thyroid, Synthroid, but rarely did I encounter the Hashimoto's aspect. Whereas today, I'm hearing about it very often. And I'm not even beating the streets anymore. I'm not in contact with people near as much as I was during that time. And yet I'm hearing about Hashimoto's and Graves on a frequent basis. So there's clearly something that has shifted, even in the last decade. There's clearly something that has shifted within the human populace, within Western society, in relation to health crises, and it's elevated significantly.
Absolutely, and I think this is a great point. That's that we can rein it back in a little bit to more specifically on the thyroid. And I really wanted to bring up the first point about nutritional deficiencies and set that up. But now I'd love if you could maybe, for people listening who don't fully understand maybe what the thyroid is, could you run us through exactly what the thyroid is, what role it has in the body, and then we can talk a little bit more about the dysfunctioning of that and how and what would happen to somebody with a dysfunction.
Yeah, just to oversimplify this, is that obviously the thyroid is responsible for regulating the metabolic rate within the body, the metabolism. And that's why oftentimes people that will have, let's say, hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, they will often have weight gain associated with that. And the reason being is that the thyroid is necessary for producing T4 hormones. Those T4 hormones then downregulate or convert into T3 hormones, which then will regulate the metabolic rate of every single cell in the body. So if your cells aren't working, if they're not activated, it's because you don't have T3 hormone activating them, if that makes sense. So you can see how adequate amounts of T3 hormone would then cause you to be in a position where you'd be able to regulate your body weight much more effectively. Now we see inversely that if somebody has hyperthyroidism, where you have a messenger molecule that's saying, hey, produce more of this. We're talking TSH here, thyroid stimulating hormone, saying, hey, produce more and more and more. And it overproduces the T4 hormone that then converts into T3 hormones. Now you have a place where you have people that are fidgety, racy, their heartbeat is elevated significantly, and they have a problem putting weight on because their metabolism is over hyper. Mm-hmm. So it goes both ways, but really that's, the thyroid, that's the main function that's playing in the body, is regulating the metabolic rate, allowing for the energy levels in our body, how active we're going to be, how alert we're going to be. Because here's the other thing too, is that when you're in hypo, you go into a state of just lacking vitality for life, sluggish, slow.
Yeah. If our cells are not getting the correct metabolic signals, then there's going to be sluggishness all over the body. That's So really well put. I'd love it if you could maybe talk about the conventional idea around Hashimoto's and Graves' disease, because they are put into the box of autoimmune diseases. I shouldn't say box, I should say Olympic-sized swimming pool of autoimmune diseases, which is just a really lazy, convenient way to label somebody's experience, because I don't believe that, given when you give the body the right nutrition and everything else that goes along with being a human being, it doesn't make mistakes like an autoimmune disease. I don't think that that's a thing. I think that we've got really lazy in regards to claiming that all these things are just an autoimmune disease and the body's just confused, it's attacking itself, which, for sure it's doing, but like the root cause of that, the root symptomology, it's idiopathic. Like we don't know, like it's way too complicated to figure that out when it's very, very straightforward. So maybe you could talk about the fact that the categorization of these thyroid disorders into that autoimmune category.
Yeah. There's three main things that you'll hear that are incredibly disabling and bring with them almost no sense of hope when you go to the doctor's office. These are the three things that you never want to hear based on what we've been taught. One, it's genetic. Nothing you can do about it. But we have a medication that you can go on for life to treat the symptoms. All right. Oh, how convenient. Two, autoimmune. You're going to have it for life. It's incurable. It's autoimmune. Your body's fighting itself. But we have another medication that we can give you that you can be on for the rest of your life to treat the symptoms. Very convenient once again. Or three, oh, you have cancer, right? Oh, all right. Like we can try to kill it and it might kill you in the process. But, here, we're going to put this on, give you this for the rest of your life. That will likely be shortened. And right. So those are the three main things that you never want to hear when you go into a doctor's office. It's genetic, it's autoimmune, or you have cancer. Well, the first two are very interesting. It's genetic. Yes, sure. It may be in fact genetic, but we are now starting to see the effects of epigenetics and the fact that you can actually change your genetic expressions, what genes are being expressed, which ones are being suppressed based on the environment that you create through your own choices. So it's not hopeless, but you just need to have the understanding that what's genetic is sure genetic, but yet alterable. You get to change it. Your choice. It's not by chance. You didn't win the lottery or you didn't lose the lottery. You ultimately get to make the choices that will affect what genes are manifesting or being suppressed.
But just when people get that diagnosis and it's genetic, there's nothing you can do about it. Oh, it's not your fault. That takes so much responsibility off that individual where it's like, oh no, this isn't my fault. It's just, I'm just unlucky. And therefore going forward to do something about it, it's, there's nothing that they can do. So like, why bother?
Yeah. And the risk with that is it also becomes part of their identity. It feeds into the victim mindset, the victim mindset will never, ever, ever serve us. You will never thrive while harboring a victim mindset over anything. And so for us to take responsibility is empowering, incredibly empowering. And it highlights the fact that we ultimately have the choice. I have the choices to, whether my hair falls out today, turns gray prematurely, or whether I maintain my hair for another decade or two, even though I have other family members that they're losing their hair faster. Why? I get to make the choices. I get to choose what my body does to a large degree. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, there are some aspects like I can't change my skin color. Okay, right. That's genetic. I don't get to change it. I do get to affect it, though, as to how well it tans compared to not tanning and burning easily based on the nutrition and based on the choices that I make. So I have these choices available to me. So genetic is not a jail sentence, or it's not a death sentence in the sense that there's nothing you can do about it. You get to choose. It's epigenetics. You change the internal environment, everything else will begin to ensue. It'll all follow suit. And so autoimmune, same thing. And I love how you took it out of a box and you put it into an Olympic-sized swimming pool, because that's exactly what's happening. Once again, disempowering, nothing you can do about it. Body's fighting itself. Oh, your body's dysfunctional, and oh well, it made a mistake and now it's attacking itself. Interesting. I want to talk. I'm going to digress for just a brief moment here. MS, autoimmune condition. Interesting. Do you know what's being suppressed in all this? Is the fact that it's directly related to parasites in the brain. Little microparasites swimming around in the cerebral spinal fluid, eating the axons or the myelin sheath surrounding the axons of the neurons. And then when the oligodendrocytes come to heal the myelin sheath, they say, hey, more food. And they eat the oligodendrocytes as well, the cells that were supposed to be repairing your brain cells. And yet that's being suppressed. And then we're being told that our body's attacking itself. Interesting. So parasite cleanses and then taking restorative nutrition that will actually heal the brain, like Empower Plus. We've seen MS corrected, but you have to get rid of the opportunistic pathogen that's in the cerebral spinal fluid that's causing the issue in the first place. And we've seen this. I've seen testimony of this even outside of the use of our supplements where people have done parasite cleanses and MS has gone into remission. So autoimmune condition or something else that we're not being told about, something else that we could easily correct. And it's a pretty quick correction in essence over the period of about a year versus a lifetime treatment of MS, which is very costly or very profitable, depending on what side of the fence you're on. If you're on the taxpayer side, it's very costly. If you're on the treatment side, it's very profitable because you have a lifetime customer. And so we see the same thing with Hashimoto's and Graves'. I'm not going to say that they're parasite related, but what I do know is that simple nutrition seems to turn them around quite quickly. Seen it firsthand. So it doesn't make sense to me that your body has turned on itself and is attacking itself when all you have to do is get some good nutrition in, and all of a sudden everything turns around. And we'll get into that, I believe, in a few moments. I'm going to let you guide this, but about what the protocols are, because they are very simplified, very simple protocols, and they work.
Yeah. And on that, before we talk into, the recommendations that we might have to support people in a root cause treatment plan for something like Hashimoto's, I'd love to just go over the typical experience for somebody who does end up on a Hashimoto's thyroiditis medication, which is, typically something like Synthroid. And a lot of people can be on these medications for decades. I mean, essentially, the typical standard medication for that disorder would be Synthroid, a synthetic form of the thyroid hormone thyroxine T4. This is taken daily to replace that hormone. This is what would happen, and this is what's happening for a lot of people. I think I looked at the statistics in Canada. It was like 1 in 10 people have hypothyroidism, which is just so alarming. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that medication and maybe that treatment for those people, because they've been on these medications for so long, they wouldn't want to come off them because they've initially gone in with a problem and this is the fix, and they're not wanting to rock the boat. Yeah, maybe you could set that up for us, like that conventional idea around, you've got this disorder, this is what you should take, and then we can talk to the fact that we've seen people come off these medications and have thriving thyroid glands once again, and they get their health back. So
yeah, absolutely. So obviously the Band-Aid approach is never the best approach because there's so much going on behind the scenes. And I always use this as an example when I'm doing my presentations, that if you were to take, let's say, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, so SSRI medication, because it's thought that you have a lack of production of serotonin. So what serotonin you will produce, we're going to prevent you from reuptaking it so that you have more serotonin floating around and available as a messenger molecule. The problem with that is that the exact same 7 nutrients that are necessary to take tryptophan and convert it into 5-hydroxytryptophan and then into serotonin are the exact same nutrients that are necessary to take tyrosine and convert it into L-DOPA and then turning into dopamine. So if you're not producing serotonin because of a lack of nutrition, you also are lacking that same nutrition that your body requires to produce dopamine. So by sidestepping it and doing a Band-Aid approach to just one biochemical pathway or neurotransmitter pathway, you're missing out on the fact that you have other dysfunctional pathways out there as well. And so the same thing goes with the thyroid. There's a reason why you're not producing adequate levels of thyroxine with hypothyroidism. And it's quite likely because you are lacking, let's go through a list here: magnesium, selenium, inositol, molybdenum. I can't do that one by itself. There we go. We got 4. Then you have vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin B2 and B3. you have all of these nutrients, and then obviously adequate amounts of sea salt. You have all these nutrients playing a role in the thyroid outside of even iodine, because iodine is necessary for the production of T4 hormone. T4, the 4 stands for 4 atoms of iodine within that molecule, within that hormone. And then it drops one iodine and becomes T3 hormone. So you have these different vitamins and minerals that are playing synergistically together to allow for proper thyroid functioning. So when you are deficient in those, you're going to see a host of other issues throughout the body as well. So by taking the Band-Aid approach and saying, okay, my thyroid is dysfunctional for whatever reason it may be. It could be just a lack of one of those nutrients. It could be a lack of inositol, right? Or it could be a lack of the magnesium or the molybdenum or the selenium. We see that very often. So now it's not going to be producing the T4 hormone. So we're going to go and take synthetic T4 hormone. We're now going to go take that to sidestep the dysfunctionality that could be easily corrected. Well, that's never the right approach. It's a very myopic approach, very nearsighted. And if you don't go and correct the root, then you're going to end up with more dysfunction as time goes on. And I think anybody can relate to that. Anybody that's gone and taken Synthroid, I think you're going to find very few people in their experience is going to say, yes, I'm exactly where I should be. I'm healthy. I'm thriving. I mean, it's all relative because we base it off of what we think we should feel. But if we've never felt great, then how do we know whether or not we're feeling great today? If you've never obtained that, that level of well-being, then you just become normalized to mundane, and you begin to relish in that, if you will, to celebrate. Oh yeah, no, I'm not terrible. Yeah, but you're still living in the dark. You just haven't seen the light yet. And so the Synthroid is definitely not a good approach, or even the desiccated thyroid, which is coming from pig, where they're taking the thyroid from a pig and they're desiccating it. And now you're consuming that, and it's feeding your thyroid because pigs are very similar to us. And so now it's feeding your thyroid with everything that your thyroid would be made up of based on the fact that it was found in the pig's thyroid. Once again, not addressing the root cause. So when we go back to it and we look at what nutrients are necessary and we just apply them on a broad level, say we're not going to do specific testing. We're not going to get blood tests. We're not going to go through all. We're just going to give you these simple foundational nutrients, the fundamental nutrients, the essential nutrients that you need for your body to even just live. We're just going to give them to you in adequate amounts and let the body sort it out. One, way more cost effective, simple. We call it a shotgun approach. We just blast you with everything that your body needs anyways, that it should have been getting out of the food, but it's not getting out of the food. And not only are you going to see an effect in your thyroid, you're going to see an effect in your mental health, and you're going to see an effect in overall performance, oxygen delivery, cardiovascular system is going to be improved. Why? Because nutrients are necessary in all of those different areas. You're going to see the whole body begin to thrive by taking the approach of giving your body the nutrients that it needed all along, specifically the ones for the thyroid.
Yeah, and I think when people listen to what you've just said there about going to the root cause of the issue, I think everyone understands that, because it makes so much sense that if you weren't not giving your body the necessary ingredients to manufacture the things that it needs to be able to do, there's going to be disorders, especially in like endocrine glands, that are so unbelievably important, that engage with every cell of the body. There's inevitably going to be issues there. But I also do have some empathy for people who are really struggling, and then they go to their doctor, and then this is the solution. They get this drug, they get this solution, because the people are so desperate for something, and they are misguided, unfortunately, by their GP, by their general practitioner, because they're not educated in regards to root cause issues either.
No.
Or have an idea of a solution, because I'm sure the education around thyroid disorders and Hashimoto's thyroiditis is that, if someone's got this, they do the blood work, they do this, they that, okay, they fall into the box of this disorder. the protocol for them is to take Synthroid at a specific dose forever.
And oftentimes it's even worse, where we're seeing the recommendation to have the thyroid removed.
Yeah.
We're seeing that way too frequently, where I have people contacting me and saying, can I still take the iodine even though I don't have a thyroid? Well, yeah, iodine is important in the body, and it's important for detoxifying you from fluoride and bromide and chloride, the other halogens. So it plays a great function in the body, but it's just really sad to hear, because once the thyroid's out, it's not coming back in. And that's a real travesty, if you will, because they've gone to the nth degree that of no return.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so many people suffering with that. And I'd love to talk about solutions. I'd love to talk about giving people some hope and some ideas about what they can do. And they can also, if they need to have conversations with anyone from Truehope, we're super open to having those conversations as well. So what really is the Truehope approach or protocol for supporting and restoring optimal thyroid function? Because you don't have to have Hashimoto's thyroiditis to benefit from getting the best out of your thyroid, because we ideally want to be in a position of prevention of these disorders. We don't want to be in a state of lack and do something about it when we've got serious symptomology. We want to be taking care of this now, because again, the simple fact is you cannot eat organic enough or well enough or enough to get the nutrition you need. So supplementation isn't an option anymore. So
and that's an unfortunate thing. And I say that in my presentations, we are unfortunately in a position in society now where we have to supplement, because we shouldn't have to. Our food should be supplying the nutrition, but it's simply not. And that's why I have a whole pet project of greenhouses just over here, where I'm growing my own food and supplementing the soil so as to get my food to become medicine again. But I digress. I'll start off with two beautiful stories that many people will be able to resonate with, unfortunately, but fortunately, because it highlights hope. So the first time I dealt with Graves, and this was the beginning of the establishment of the protocols, was a number of years back. I received a phone call from a lady who had an incredibly elevated heart rate. And we're talking standing heart rate, 150 to 180, right? And I monitor my heart rate while I'm exercising. I'm hard pressed to get up there when I'm exercising, even when I'm pushing it hard. And so here, this is just what her standing heart rate is on a regular basis. And the symptomatology, it was that she was very racy. She would speak very quickly and was just overactive and very, very slender. So she goes to the doctor, gets sent over to the specialist, endocrinologist, and they determine that she has Graves, and they recommend medication. And she phones me right after this had taken place. She hadn't filled the prescription yet, and says, "Hey, this is just what happened, and this is what's going on." Okay. And she says, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" "Well, I don't want to go on the medications." I said, "Okay, good. Here's what we can do for you." And so I gave her the protocols, not knowing exactly how they were going to work, knowing that they would work, but not knowing exactly how fast they would work. And we'll get into the protocols in a minute. Well, she phones me back a week later, and she's already had a major reduction in her symptoms of the Graves disease. So we're talking, Graves and Hashimoto's, just to be clear here, are being claimed to be the same disorder, just one's on the hyper side, one's on the hypo side. So just so that people understand it, obviously Hashimoto's is much more prevalent within society, but they're basically the same condition. And both conditions, you can't just go and give somebody iodine, because they can't handle the iodine with the dysfunction of the thyroid. So within 1 week, she's already starting to do better, but she goes back for a follow-up. And the doctor, the endocrinologist, says, "Oh, wow," did the testing, says the medication that we prescribed you is working really well. So there's already a marked difference. Now, she didn't have the heart to tell the endocrinologist that actually I didn't fill the prescription. I'm taking all these other nutrients. So he notes that there's already a big difference, and now he's going off of his knowledge, off of his own experience, but we're still going to have to remove your thyroid. And so she phones me up and she's not happy about this. And she says, what should I do? I said, well, what do you want to do? She says, well, I don't want to remove my thyroid. I said, okay, good. Well, the endocrinologist has already identified that the protocol is working. We're only 1 week in. Keep on doing it. Just keep on doing it. And she did. And it was great. And then I didn't hear anything from her for a long time. And then it's probably about 8 months later, or maybe a year, somewhere around there, she phones me and says, my symptoms are returning. I said, oh boy, what? This is weird. This is fundamental nutrients. We just covered the basis of what you needed to get your thyroid working. It was working. Everything was fine. And now it's not working. This is really weird.
Yeah.
And so I'm racking my brain over this. And I say, okay, what are you currently taking for this? Well, nothing. It was fixed. Okay. The deficiency returns. That was at the root of the dysfunctional nature of the thyroid all along. When the deficiency returns, the dysfunction will return with it. It's that simple. So what she highlighted was an AB scientific design for me. A was she had Graves' disease. B was she got on the protocols, on the fundamental nutrients that you absolutely need, that you're supposed to be getting out of your food, and it corrects. And then she goes back to A again, where she gets off the supplements and the condition returns, gets back on, and it goes away. Well, this seems to be kind of par for the course. And the reason why I'm sharing this story is not only to instill hope, but to also educate other people not to have to reinvent that wheel of being like, was it actually the nutrients? I know I'm feeling better. Maybe I should get off the nutrients. Well, go ahead, to your own peril. You're going to go back to that condition again, and then you're going to have to dig yourself out of that hole again. And so the next success story was, once again, this wasn't a middle-aged woman this time. It was a young woman. I think she was 19 years old at the time. Phones me December of 2024. Now, every 6 weeks, she's getting tested by her endocrinologist. Now, she identifies to me. Her father knows who I am, so he reaches out and organizes a call with us. And so she's laying out the symptoms. Now, she's not telling me it's Graves' disease. So I give her the protocols as if it's not Graves' disease, which is one variance. You introduce the iodine immediately. Now, I did then go on to say that if it was Hashimoto's or Graves, we wouldn't introduce the iodine. And then she fills me and says, oh, well, it actually is Graves. I said, whoa, okay, hold on then. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to change this up. You're going to push the iodine back at least 3 weeks. You're going to do the other protocols that I already gave you. So every 6 weeks, she's getting tested, her levels. Now, I give her the protocols one day. The next day, her and her father go and buy all of the supplements that I had recommended, which was only 3 supplements. And that was the Empower Plus, that was the chelated selenium, and it was the inositol. They go and purchase them. So that's day 1. She starts taking them. By day 7, she's due to have her 6-week checkup with the endocrinologist. So 7 days after taking the Empower Plus, 6 capsules per day, reason being, it has magnesium, it has molybdenum, it has vitamin C, it has vitamin B2 and B3. It has small amounts of inositol, but not enough. That's why we introduced the inositol all on its own as well, which one of these bottles there, the inositol. So 7 days later, she gets tested. Her endocrinologist phones her back about 3 days later and says your thyroxine levels have normalized. She phones me and says this. I said, okay, well, what does that mean to you? Well, it means that it's working. I said, okay, so where would your thyroxine levels normally be? Well, she says elevated to extremely elevated. I said, okay, but they're in the normal range now. She says, yeah. I said, within 7 days. Yeah. Awesome. Already within 7 days. Now, I suspect based on her age that she was probably able to heal a little faster than the other lady that I was working with that would have been in her 60s. So, but either way, they both got better. Just one got better much quicker. So before she even started to introduce the iodine, her levels had normalized. Her thyroid was now functioning. And it would be about 3 weeks later that she would begin to introduce the iodine. Now, here's where it gets a little dicey. Is I just received a call this past weekend from her and her father again. So here we are now, April of 2026. So we're almost a year and a half later. And here's what's happened. They noticed, the parents noticed that when they were out for dinner with their daughter, who's now 20, 21-ish, that when at one point in time she lifted her chin. Now the thyroid is right here. It's a butterfly-shaped gland. And right here in the throat area, they noticed that when she lifted her chin at one point in the conversation, that they could actually see her thyroid. She had an enlarged thyroid, goiter, which is par for the course for Graves. So then they reach out to me, they call me, and we talk. And once again, I go through it and say, what are you taking for it? Well, I'm taking the Empower Plus sometimes only in the morning, sometimes not, right? Going to university, busy, distracted. And the inositol, I'm getting it, sporadically here, there, all that type of stuff. Okay. And same with the selenium. Okay. But I'm taking the iodine consistently. Oh,
okay.
Now we see the problem, because this is where the issue lies, is that if you have somebody with Graves' disease, they're overproducing T4 hormones, the thyroxine. They're elevated levels. You give it more iodine, it will produce even more. So it actually exponentiates the problem. So because she had gone inconsistent with all of the other products that were ultimately correcting the issue at the base level for the thyroid, so that it wasn't in a state of Hashim or Graves, or hyperthyroidism. Now that she wasn't consistent with those, but she was consistent with the iodine, now we have a problem.
Yeah.
So I had to redirect her, say, stop the iodine. We're going to go back to just square one again. Stop the iodine for 3 weeks. Just stop it. And take consistently the 6 Empower Plus per day, which is now getting into a therapeutic dose. And anybody who's watching this for the first time hasn't seen anything about Empower Plus before. There's 37 ingredients in the Empower Plus, 37 active ingredients, 37 active nutrients. So 6 capsules into a whole lot of any one particular ingredient, if you will. So you're not overdoing it on any of those ingredients. It's just that there's a lot of ingredients competing for space within that capsule. So 6 of those a day. And then get back on the, at minimum, 2 to 3 doses of inositol per day, which is a heaping teaspoon, but try to get up to 4 and do it before bed. You're going to get better sleep. So there's those bonuses, right, as well, because inositol does so much. It's a messenger molecule, really, is what it is. It's allowing the cells to adequately interact with hormones and neurotransmitters in the body, enhancing communication in the body so that the body's functional. And we all know what happens in a family when communication breaks down. We know what happens in communities, in churches, whatever. If you have communication breakdown, you have dysfunction. Same thing with our body. And the inositol is really the enhancer for communication in the body to make sure that everything is speaking. The cells are speaking to the neurotransmitters and the hormones, so that when you're actually producing hormones, they're doing their job. So get back on the inositol consistently. Get on the 400 micrograms of chelated selenium. So now we have our protocol right there. 6 Empower Plus, 400 micrograms of chelated selenium, and 3 to 4 doses of inositol, which each dose is 1 heaping teaspoon or 5 grams. So 15 to 20 grams of inositol throughout the day. Don't take it all at once. It will serve as a laxative. You will not be happy. Okay. And then after about 3 weeks, you can start to introduce the iodine and do so slowly. Now, you always start iodine slowly anyways, because detoxification is inevitable. It will help displace fluoride and bromide in the body. Fluoride and bromide accumulating where iodine should be accumulating, and it will flush that out. And if you flush too quickly, you'll end up with rashes, very, very itchy rashes, fluid-filled rashes. Not very comfortable. I'm speaking from experience. Don't do what I did. Start off slow. Okay. And when I say slow, 1 drop per day, and over the next 3 to 4 weeks, then you can get up to about 10 drops per day. So that's the general protocol, and people are trying it out and it's working. And the beautiful thing is that because we're dealing with fundamental nutrients, the essential nutrients that cause the thyroid to function, it doesn't matter if you're on the hyper side with Graves or if you're on the hypo side with Hashimoto's. It works. It gets the thyroid into a state of functionality. It works. So it's not like when you're taking a herb that's stimulating something and maybe it's helping with hyper, bring it down, that now you don't want to do that if you're in hypo because it'll bring it down. We're supplying the base level, the root nutrients that your body needed all along, and the thyroid will figure it out. So simple protocol that works across the board. Now, going back to the protocols, if somebody's experiencing hypo or hyperthyroidism, but it's not Graves and it's not Hashimoto's, at that point in time, they don't need to wait the 3 weeks to introduce the iodine. They can actually introduce the iodine immediately. But once again, slow over the next 3 to 4 weeks, ramping it up to about 10 drops per day. You can do it various ways. The first thing I do in the morning when I wake up is I go down to, or not down, I go over to my water area where I've got my water filtration system, and I'll pour an ounce of water and I'll put anywhere between 6 to 10 drops of iodine in the water, depending on how I'm feeling that morning. Do I need a little bit more of a perk me up? I'll do 10 drops. But then what I do following that, and I'll swish it around my mouth, and a lot of it'll absorb right there, which is right by the thyroid. So the production of T4 hormones starts to happen right away, which now my metabolism is going to start to kickstart pretty quickly. But then what I'll do is an extended release because I don't feel like going back every 3 to 4 hours and doing another follow-up dose so as to keep the iodine levels flowing to the thyroid to keep the T4 hormones, producing into T3 hormones to keep my metabolic rate up throughout the day. So to keep sustained energy levels, I do an extended release, convenient application, if you will. And what that is, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. No, under this lighting. I don't think you're gonna be able to see it so much. Yeah, no, you can't. Not under the lighting. Yeah, you can see a little bit of yellow there.
A little bit.
Yep, you can see a little bit of the yellow there. So under normal lighting, it shows up a little bit better, albeit that was a number of hours ago. And what that's highlighting to me is I'm absorbing a little bit faster than normal because I would anticipate that still to be there 8 hours later. So that serves as a patch test to say, am I deficient? Do I need more? And it also serves as an extended release. So I'm constantly absorbing as my body needs it, as my thyroid's demanding it. I'm absorbing iodine through the skin to keep that feed going so that I have sustained energy levels, sustained metabolism all throughout the day.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that is so important that people understand that it's not a super complex or complicated place to get yourself back into, let's say, optimal thyroid health. As you said, that a couple of examples, it's weeks rather than the months and years that maybe some people might anticipate. But again, once we give the body the right circumstances and get out of its way, it's going to take care of us in so many different ways. What do you think about just like a preventative protocol that most people, I mean, it's more frequently women who are susceptible to Hashimoto. So let's just say for like the average adult woman, what would be a good way to supplement to prevent getting into a situation where they do have thyroid disease?
Yeah, great question. And we're talking about overall hormone health when we're talking about this. And the reason being is that the protocol I just laid out is basically the same protocol that you would use for PCOS as well. With very, very, like if somebody were to go and just take the protocols I just gave and take it as I stated, the likelihood that the PCOS would be gone is very, very high. They might need to introduce maybe something like DIM, maybe as an additional treatment, but generally that's going to deal with the PCOS as well. So when we're talking about a preventative protocol, what you can do, and this is just going to make you thrive better. You are going to thrive mentally with the Empower Plus. You're going to feel better. You're going to have more clear thought processes, less brain fog. You're going to have less bouts of depression, less bouts of anxiety. You're going to be much more resilient to stress. You're going to be able to even deal with past traumas and finally process them in a way that's healthy so that you can reflect back on past situations and not have triggers so much by applying the same protocol. Why? Because you're feeding the body and the brain the nutrients that it needed all along. So if you were to take the protocol I did and just basically half it, if you went down to 2 doses of inositol per day, make sure one of them is right before bed so you're getting a great sleep. It's going to give you a much better sleep because the melatonin is going to do a better job now with having that inositol in your system. So you go down to two teaspoons of that, or heaping teaspoons per day. Go down to 4 Empower Plus as a maintenance dose if you don't already have a pre-existing condition. If you do, take 6, right? Get better, feel better. You're going to love it. I mean, day by day, like every day is going to be better. People pay $7 for a fantastic coffee to give them an hour pick me up. Let's spend less than that and have a much better day by day, better sleep, better experience. Life is just better, right? So you go take the Empower Plus, same thing, preventative, and then take the iodine, preventative, 5-10 drops per day, if depending on how fast it's absorbing into the skin. If you're taking too much, you'll start to get a little bit racy, and you'll know it. So back it off. Just slow down. And so preventative is a beautiful thing because it's going to prevent you from all sorts of issues. Brain degradation, mood disorders, PCOS, other issues arising with the endocrine system. And ultimately, your thyroid is going to be doing better, and you're going to have better weight management. You're going to do better performance-wise within the gym. You're going to have better muscle tone. Your whole body is going to function better when you have the proper nutrition. And really, when we're talking about this, the Empower Plus, we got vitamins, minerals. Then you have, the iodine as well, which is another mineral. And then as long as you're taking adequate amounts of amino acids and some omega fatty acids alongside that, you're basically covering the basis of nutrition. And that inositol is, like I said, that communication enhancer. You're going to do well.
Yeah. I love the fact that here at Truehope, we just have the 6 products right now. And many supplement companies have dozens, if not hundreds of SKUs because, they're trying to compete with other companies in regards to different products. But we take a very different approach in regards to that. We kicked off with the Empower Plus, our flagship product, and then we've introduced 5 other products that are supporting people with certain and also very common disorders, so they're able to actually get the best out of the Empower Plus. So we're looking to take care of like mental health, hormone health, thyroid health, structural integrity, all of these things. And essentially, I just take all 6 of our products and an omega and sometimes some more vitamin D. So I love the fact that we've kind of got everything really wrapped up to take care of people's health, and prevention is that key aspect. We don't want people to have to step into a situation where they're digging themselves out of a big health hole. We want to make sure that they're thriving through their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, all the way through their life. And the best way to do that, without question, these days is to supplement with really effective, well-researched products. And I find it. I remember going to nutrition school and becoming aware that not all supplement companies are the same. Not all products are the same. And it's really important to research the products and the companies, that the supplements that they have on offer before you start consuming them, because it's not all equal out there. So it's really important to make sure that you're doing your own research and, listening to these types of podcasts, going onto our website, listening to testimonials. There's a lot of information out there, and it's important to dig a little bit before jumping into something.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, there's a couple of things that I'm sure are rising up in the audience's mind right now is, well, what about if I'm taking Synthroid or desiccated thyroid? Okay, that's easy. Get your levels tested. Also, just come feel how you're doing. If you're doing the protocol, you're going to find that you're going to be coming off that medication. And in most instances, completely off that medication and doing very, very well. And so it's not going to be an overnight thing where you're all of a sudden going to go, you blow yourself through the roof where you're producing, if you're in hypo, all of a sudden you're producing too much thyroxine. But just keeping an eye on things, and over a safe bet, just start to slowly reduce off the Synthroid or the desiccated thyroid over the period of a month as your body normalizes, as the thyroid comes back into functionality, and you'll find that you're doing much better. And that it's fairly simple. It's pretty general. Just know that it's going to get better, and that you won't require that medication anymore. So that's a beautiful thing there. And then going back to what you were saying, going back to the whole prevention, I love the statement of, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. And so we don't want to get to the point where we're having to cure a serious condition, because there's so much that's gotten to the point that's gotten you there. But we can do it, and we will do it, but it's preferable not to do it. And the reason being is that people ask when they get on the Empower Plus and they get better, maybe from a mental health condition, and they say, do I have to take it for the rest of my life? And I always rephrase and say, do you get to take it for the rest of your life? You get to. This is a fantastic thing, because how you're feeling, the experience, the life experience that you're having right now, is that not something that you would desire for the rest of your life? Yeah, it costs you a little bit of money. So does regular food. There's a reason why people buy organic food. It's to change their overall experience in life. And we know that when you have a buildup of toxins and all that, life becomes a little bit miserable. So people will pay the extra money to feel better. So it's not just that you're preventing something, it's that you're actually enabling something day by day. And what you're enabling is a better life experience, more vitality for life, more clarity, better decision making, less emotional dysregulation. So you're able to interact and connect with people on a better level. These are things that are to be sought after. And if you're only spending, $2 to $3 per day to obtain that type of experience, it's well worth it. That's small. That's small. And when we actually look at it from an economic standpoint, is the fact that when you become more functional, your value increases, that you actually make more money. So I don't look at the nutrition as a liability. I look at it as an asset, in the sense that the more I consume, the more stable I am, the more productive I am, the more opportunities I have to make money. They pay for themselves in that aspect, and I get to have that awesome life experience. So if you can start to engage in a proactive way to prevent, you're going to actually enjoy the benefits day by day. Not just, hey, I'm staving off of this issue that could arise. No. I'm actually empowering myself to feel better every single day, while at the same time preventing myself from ever going into that level of dysfunction where you'd have like the PCOS or the hypo or hyperthyroidism or a mental health condition.
I love it. Fabulous. Well, that's a great place, I think, to finish up there, David. We've given some people some really interesting conversation piece, and I hope understanding in regards to that people are not destined forever to be on these types of medications, or to suffer and not feel amazing. I hope that people have got a little bit more of motivation and understanding there to maybe ask some more questions and perhaps take an alternative journey. And again, here at Truehope, we're ready to field any questions people might have, so don't hesitate to do that. But I don't know, do you have any closing comments, David?
Well, you know what, like my dad always says, is it's better to make it than to take it. And when it comes to treating mental health conditions or thyroid conditions, let's go back to the basis and just empower our bodies with the fundamental nutrients that we always needed, so that we can make what we need, rather than applying a Band-Aid approach of taking something that, like the, Synthroid or whatever. Let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to the root, and let's change how we operate on a day-to-day basis. And I'm going to digress for just a brief moment in closing, and end off with Henry David Thoreau, philosopher from the 1800s, is known for stating, for every 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil, there is one who strikes the root. He was identifying a human issue, that oftentimes we're hacking at the leaves rather than striking the root. Well, what we've just identified today is the root issue, going back to the fundamental nutrients, the essential nutrients that your body absolutely needs, that cannot be replaced by anything else. And that when we take those and consume those, the body will ultimately heal itself, and do so quickly and much more effectively than by ever applying any form of Band-Aid approach, whether natural or allopathic.
Beautiful. And I've just had one thing kind of pop into my mind there, because when you're talking about people using a preventative protocol, they'll be using iodine, or if they're looking to, do a few weeks of the initial 3 products and then introducing the iodine, there's a big difference between our nascent iodine and the other iodines on the shelves. And we have to approach that. We have to talk about that, because you could look at the 3 other ones that you typically on the shelves that are $15, and then you've got ours, which is more expensive. There's a big reason that our product is there and is very, very present, and it's very unique and very different, especially for those people with thyroid disorders, because a seaweed kelp-based iodine could be a very, very different experience for people. So can you touch on that before we close?
Absolutely. So nascent iodine is really quite a beautiful form of iodine. We're not in the business of getting into competition with all of the other forms of iodine or forms of supplements out there. We're not in the business of producing Me Too products. We're only going to produce products that we know that we can stand out on the shelf and make a substantive therapeutic difference in people's lives. And there was a void within the health food stores within Canada where nascent iodine was not available. And nascent iodine, what it is you take an I2 molecule, right? So you're taking the I2, which is iodide, and you're subjecting it to an electromagnetic charge. And that electromagnetic charge will actually take the I2, which is 2 atoms of iodine, and separate it. Now, what we've just done there is we've taken that molecule and we've reduced its size into half. So surface tension goes down, which means absorption increases significantly. So that's the first thing, is the bioavailability of it is enhanced significantly. And then when it gets to the thyroid would normally take something like I2 or potassium iodide or sodium iodide. So now you have a molecule again. And through enzyme reactions, the thyroid will separate that out, steal the iodine, and convert or use it to produce T4 molecule or T4 hormone. Now the thyroid doesn't have to do that. So you're not taxing the thyroid. And so that can be concerning about taking other forms of iodine. If you don't have a really well functioning thyroid, it can be kind of congestive. So now what we've done is we've made it much more potent in the sense that it absorbs rapidly and that it's able to convert in or be converted into T4 hormones even more rapidly than some other forms, but it's more gentle on the thyroid. And so that's why we've opted for the nascent iodine. And what's of interest, just as a side note, is, the whole concept of the nascent iodine, people have debated it, but you can actually see through a spectrometer. You can actually see the difference when you subject it to the electromagnetic charge, because when you take that molecule and separate it out, it actually changes the ability for light to transfer through the liquid. And so that's how you know when you've been able to effectively create the nascent iodine, is that now when you pass light through, it doesn't pass through nearly as well because there's more of these atoms floating around like that separately that will actually block light transference. So that's the test to see. So it's really kind of cool. So there's a physical identifier to highlight that, yes, this electromagnetic charge is actually breaking these bonds apart. And we've seen how much more effective it is than standard iodines. So that's why it costs more, but it's because it's more effective. So many people will compare it, thinking they're comparing apples to apples, and say, oh, well, I'm going to take 400 micrograms of this one or 400 micrograms of this one. One drop, they're the same. One drop, 400 micrograms. No. 400 micrograms of what? Of atomized or pre-converted iodine, or of iodine that's going to be less bioavailable, but then when it does get to the thyroid, then it has to go through an enzyme reaction to then be converted to then produce T4 hormones. Whereas this one absorbs faster, gets to the thyroid, and is immediately ready to be converted into T4 hormones without the enzyme reactions taking place.
Yeah, massively important point. And we've also got other podcasts talking about that, which I'll make sure that are in the show notes so people can kind of follow up a little bit on the differences between our iodine and the other ones on the shelves. Because, when it comes to selecting or choosing natural health products, there is always a financial economic choice to be made as well. But again, like, it's that long-term investment in your health, which is so vital.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks so much for joining me, David. Again, super valuable conversation. It's something I've learned so much as well, to be able to talk to those individuals who are struggling with thyroid health. But ideally, we want to be talking about this as a preventative manner that people can use in their lifestyle, like right now, for everybody. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing so much with us, David.
Well, thank you for having me on and hosting this and guiding the conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing fantastic feedback from people that are applying these protocols en masse and helping them get off these thyroid medications and just ultimately achieve that vitality for life that they're looking for.
Beautiful. Well, that is it for this episode of Truehope Cast, the official podcast for Truehope Canada. Be sure to check the show notes for alternative and other links that I'm going to share with you. I'm also going to share the link that's going to describe the patch test that people can do with our niacin iodine. That's also a very interesting indicator. So you can learn more about that there. Check out the show notes. But for anything else, you can check out our website, which is www.truehopecanada.com. I think I've covered everything. We'll be back with you for another exciting episode soon. But until then, we'll see you soon.